My book, The Art and Making of Fantasy Miniatures, is available now. Check out the link in the description to find out more. Elsewhere, The Fantasy Art of Jesper Ejsing. Published in 2019, this is Jesper's first monograph and collects his fantasy art from the past 15 years. The majority of the pieces are from his work on Magic the Gathering, followed by Dungeons & Dragons and then Pathfinder, but also tons of stuff from other fantasy RPGs and card games that he's worked on. Now before we get into it, just in case you are new to the channel, I do want to point out all opinions, praise or criticism throughout are completely divorced from the art itself. That's not what I'm reviewing or commenting on. It's too subjective and you'll make up your own mind whether you like it or not based on what you see. This review is just about assessing the idea of the book part of art book, so the art itself is irrelevant to the review. But anyway, one dissatisfaction I have with most artist monographs is that they are typically very slender affairs, around like 100 pages or something. Even when they are otherwise so well done and still really enjoyable to look at, they still feel like an insubstantial visual snack when what I really want is a meal. So I was very excited at first glance when I saw this book because it's thick as hell. A 400-page monograph, humana. Surprise, surprise though, it's a bit of an illusion. 400 pages doesn't count if it doesn't have 400 pages worth of content. Then it's just an expensive, wasteful illusion. And it's so frustrating because it's such a simple, stupid thing. One single problem that shouldn't even be an issue, yet it's spoiling what otherwise shows evidence of being an incredible art book. And that is the ludicrous use and frequency of spreading one image across 2 pages. Not only does it waste valuable space by taking up 2 whole pages with an unnecessarily large image, but actually damaging because in essentially every case it completely spoils the image by having the center crevice of the spread cut it in 2. And because artworks are typically designed with the center of the image containing the focal characters or action, that's the part that's usually getting lost or just spoiled by that divide. Like, look at this. How is it even possible that the artist, book designer, editors, and publisher all presumably saw stuff like this and said, yep, this looks good to me, this is definitely the best way to present these images? It's insane. Like, I'm sure it did look good viewing as a digital file open in Illustrator or whatever, but do these people who presumably make a living designing and publishing books not understand how physical books work? People in some other reviews I read for the book, and even Jesper in an interview, claim it's so you can really appreciate the detail. But that is complete bullshit. Far more has been lost than gained through doing this. In an art book, I expect to be able to make out an appreciable amount of detail for the image to be meaningful and fully enjoyable, but that doesn't mean I need every brushstroke to be the width of a finger in order to appreciate the piece, especially when you can't appreciate the image anyway because it's divided in half and lost in the center. How is that more important than being able to appreciate the whole image? This is not about opinions or personal preference, it is unambiguously, indefensibly bad and foolish, and I can't fathom why this is even an issue. And like I said, it's not just spoiling the images, but also wasting a significant amount of space creating an unnecessarily large book that is just an illusion of the amount of content you're paying for. So just to hit you with the cold hard numbers, lest you think I'm making it a bigger issue than it is, over 75 pieces use this 2-page treatment. That's over 150 pages out of 400. That's almost 40% of the entire book. 150 pages used to show 75 pieces, and not even show them properly or in a way that's enjoyable. So as far as I'm concerned, 150 completely wasted pages. That's an entire book's worth. And that's what you're paying such a high price for, because this is a very expensive book, by the way. Granted, it is physically a very high quality product, I'll get to that in a bit, but 150 wasted pages is still adding significantly to the cost. Or if money and size aren't an issue, you can also look at it as space that could have been used for more content. And that's not even including the far more minor but still noteworthy number of single page images that really don't need it and could have been consolidated without losing any meaningful level of detail. So it's basically a 250 page book masquerading as and charging you for a 400 page book and ruining images to do so. And the reason this particularly drives me nuts is because, aside from that issue, everything else shows evidence of a truly respectable and thoughtful book. For example, in contrast, it also uses some amazing sensible layout for the landscape pieces of 2 to a page that shows how those one image spreads should have been done. Like, look at this. This is a style of layout for a spread that's also frequently used. It's so simple and may not seem incredible and rather obvious until you start thinking about it and comparing it to the bad examples not only in this book but plenty of other stupid art books too. You've got 2 images to a page on this side that not only allows for more content to be packed in, or at least make efficient use of space if you want to cut down the page count and cost without losing any meaningful detail in the images, they're not too small at all. And on the right, we have a very appropriate use of a full page image. It's all just simple, appropriate, elegant, beautiful, and most importantly, functional. Then we turn the page and have to see the complete opposite of that. I don't even know what the hell's going on in this image. So I just can't reconcile how it's been done by the same people who 60% of the time show true care and skill in making the book, but then drop the ball so foolishly in this one area to make 40% of the book complete garbage. And it's such a shame to have the book spoiled through being so conflicted in such a brain-dead, avoidable way. However, I've said about 60% of the book is amazing, so it's only fair to also praise and highlight those things, cause I don't want to give the impression this book's completely valueless, no one could possibly enjoy it, cause that's not true. It's just you need to be aware of and expecting its conflicted nature and dishonest, wasteful, expensive illusions suggested by its size in order to make an informed assessment of are you going to be happy with the book despite that. Because the majority still offers a robust collection of such beautiful, high-quality work. Still tons of stuff to look at and enjoy. Going back to what I mentioned at the start about that desire for a substantial experience and satisfying collection, my major concern with the one-image spreads taking up so much space is not the added expense to the book, but rather, is there a lot of Jesper's work that didn't make it into this book but could have had the layout been more sensible? That's my big concern with any art book. As a fan, my satisfaction stems from feeling like I have the definitive reference on my shelf. If not a literally complete collection, however, because as with any art book, as a fan you may think you want every piece represented, but really that's only of value to collectors or for research purposes. Because the closer you get to true completion of including every single piece, you hit a point of diminishing returns where the amount of boring crap starts to outweigh the number of good pieces, causing the book to lag and bring down the overall impression. And that's a very difficult balancing act when curating an art book, and I mention it here because I wish I had more insight as to whether this is an essentially complete collection of Jesper's work or more of a best of, but either way, one image spread issues aside, and providing there's nothing amazing missing, then the curation here is fantastic. The quality is so high, with every piece feeling like it deserves to be in a book. There's a distinct lack of any filler or lackluster pieces, and when you combine that with the large number of pieces, it creates a powerhouse showcase that is satisfyingly lengthy but without ever flagging. It's very rare to come across art books that can pull that off. And I suppose that's the reward of being patient and waiting 15 years to do the book, which allows it to avoid that dissatisfaction of most monographs being too slim and a disappointingly insubstantial experience, because the artist simply hasn't produced enough amazing works over a shorter period to fill a book. And then even worse than a book that's too short is when they try and cheat it by padding it out with less impressive work or bad layout, which just raises costs and lowers the overall impression. So for this book to succeed in such a rare and brilliant way on this front, only to shoot itself in the foot unnecessarily over something as stupid as those one-image spreads, it's such a shame over something that should never have been an issue. So even if this book is essentially a complete collection, that space being wasted by the one-image spreads still could have been used to include more of the other things the book is lacking, specifically sketches and text. For the reasons I mentioned a second ago, I personally love the curation decision to have this book contain next to no sketches. There's only a handful that appear on the chapter title pages. But I know some people, particularly artists, will completely disagree with me on this and love seeing sketches for the potential insight and education they offer, which I totally understand, and I do like monographs to feature a bit of sketch work, but considering how so many art books rely so heavily on presenting sketches, it often feels like uninteresting filler. That's why, even though I don't personally enjoy or buy artists' sketchbooks, I certainly approve of the practice of giving the sketches their own book if it means keeping the main art book focused on final works. So in principle, I was happy to see an art book that seems to acknowledge that dedicating as much space as possible to the point of exclusively featuring final works is going to be of most importance, interest, and enjoyment to the majority of the audience. However, in practice, in this case, my adoration is moot due to the fact that this book has so much potential room to include more sketch work without sacrificing any of the final works. When books are this thick, binding becomes a huge issue, but here, as far as I can tell, it is tight, top-notch quality. The format of the book is also perfectly sized. There's often a tendency with art books to go with an unnecessarily and obnoxiously large page size, which is just expensive and inconvenient, whereas here the size is sensibly large enough to experience and enjoy the detail of the works. And so from a purely physical perspective, it's very impressive how the format, page count, page quality, and how that all ties into servicing the main priority of presenting the works and book itself. It's all exquisitely balanced and astutely handled. The paper used here is also worthy of note. It uses a matte paper where usually art books exclusively use glossy paper, which in most cases is fine and the best option. There's no definitive best type of paper. It all depends on dozens of individual factors for the particular book, images, printing, and so on. But my point is, the choice of paper in this case looks fantastic for this art. The colors, the feel, just a wonderful print job and image reproduction, and so a really good choice of paper in this case. And that's an example of the sort of thoughtful, expert attention to detail in book design that really lets me know it was handled by people who know how to make their particular book the best possible. So how are these the same people also cocking up so badly and displaying the opposite of that with the one image spreads? I don't understand. I don't mind if a book's expensive when it's wisely going towards maximizing quality on a purely functional front, not being wasted on any unnecessary fancy bells and whistles that are only there to appear more impressive. So again, the book's really conflicted on that front. It displays investing in functional, high quality stuff, but then also bloats the cost with wasting 150 pages to look more impressive than it is. Plus, that extra weight also adds extra shipping costs, particularly if you're ordering internationally. As for the text, there is so little that it's almost not worth mentioning, but I will anyway for the sake of thoroughness. Every piece is captioned in English with a title and telling you what it was for. The rest of the text is bilingual French and English, which I hate solely on principle because of how it wastes space printing the exact same information in two languages, but in this case there's so little text that the space it takes up doing so is negligible. There's a sort of bio, introduction, and step-by-step process thing, but it's also short that it's essentially meaningless and you don't really learn much about Jesper or his career. Personally, I don't mind that at all. I'm just here for the art, and if there had have happened to be good text, then that would have just been a bonus, but I'm indifferent to its absence in theory. Again, in practice, however, in this case, like with the sketches, one, there's plenty of room for more text that would have been a way better use for those 150 pages worth of spreads instead of taking up space and ruining the images, and also, like the sketches, two, I know there are people who are very interested in that sort of stuff and will be disappointed the text is so light/non-existent. One genuinely enjoyable and interesting part of the text is there are maybe like a dozen artworks that get singled out for a paragraph of commentary from Jesper. It's not like technical how I did this process sort of stuff. It's more behind the scenes anecdotes, but I found them to be very insightful and interesting, to the point that, in theory, I definitely would have liked more of it and the book better for it, were it not for the fact that, one, the more text, the more the bilingual printing becomes an issue, but even more importantly, two, every instance where commentary appears, the image itself is split and spoiled by being printed across 2 pages, which actually I didn't even include those in my 150-page tally. One thing I would have liked as far as text is some sort of preface or foreword explaining the book, its creation and curation. I think those are really important to help understand the intent and limitations of the book, which would help the reader understand how much of his work the book contains, just give a better idea of the curation, as I think that provides understanding, establishes expectation, and clears up any confusion in trying to ascertain the exact nature of the collection presented. So yeah, ultimately very frustrating to have 60% of a book that displays intelligent, skillful, elegant, functional, honest, straightforward handling and presentation that shows potential of being such a respectable monograph that an artist and their fans could be truly proud of. And that represents the majority, which definitely counts for a lot. But it's just not a particularly impressive ratio to then have 40% be the complete opposite of that through just the most bafflingly foolish, simple, obvious, avoidable cock-up you could imagine. Bloating the book, presenting and promising a dishonest representation of its contents, spoiling over 75 pieces of art in the process, and then charging you for it. And honestly, like I said before, it's not about the price that bothers me beyond the principle of it being a cheat. I care more about the book itself. Shrink those one-page spreads down to half a page and you'd have an awesome, far better, cheaper, appropriately designed and presented 250-page collection without any disadvantages. Or you can have a higher price and page count if it's allowing for more pieces that would have been worth including. Or if, as it stands, this is already a notably complete collection of Jesper's art, then including more sketches or text would have been great, because despite my indifference to the lack of text and joy at lack of sketches, like I said, I know a lot of people will be disappointed by how so much more could have been included were it not for the one-image spreads. So I guess you've just got to ask yourself, how big a fan are you of the works you've seen, and are you going to get enough enjoyment out of the awesome 60% and be content with it for it to be worth the worthless 40% trying to drag it down?